This is Talk is Sheep, a podcast by the Wild Sheep Society of British Columbia. Come along as we take conversations that matter to you into the high alpine.
Mr. Hamilton, straight off the airplane out of northern British Columbia with a couple of big bull moose down, I think. How was the trip?
Oh, did I fall asleep there for a second there? Holy crap, those things are tiring. Like, wow. Went in for what was originally scheduled to be 10 days and ended up, due to weather, coming out on the 13th day. But yeah, it's the last few days, as you say, you end up hating it. But the minute you step off that plane, you're like, okay, when are we going back? So it was an experience. It really was.
So this is your first fly-in trip, your first backcountry. Like, I know you grizz hunt. I'm not saying you're not experienced, but it's different. So
it is.
What's your thoughts of it? So freaky, amazing. I know you got some bad weather back there. You got to see what it's like with these northern float operators, right? That's an experience in itself, right? It's just mind blowing, like in cool ways, and like it's yeah. What was the highlight for you the whole trip? Would you say?
The company. It sounds cliche, cool. But the company was amazing. I couldn't imagine doing a solo hunt like that, especially with the weather that came in, and having to spend so much time in a tent. Like, when some of the fronts came in, we were at the tent by 3 and we weren't leaving till 9 the next morning. And that's a hell of a lot of time to spend with your thoughts when it's coming down at like -7 overnight and you're dealing with 50-kilometer-an-hour gusts and snow and wind. And it really screws with your mind a little bit. And you really find out what you're made of. And it sounds like a cliche, and you find out who you are when you do one of these hunts. And when you're digging the poles in and you're looking, okay, there's only 200 more meters to go up this little slide and the wind's coming down. You do look inside yourself and you go, well, it is a mental game at this point. I got all the right gear. I've got the direction I'm going. I've got everything I need physically, but do I have what it takes mentally? And that was a big takeaway for me. It was like, oh, wow moment. You hear about people talking about it, but until you've actually lived it and hiked it and slept it and ate it and washed it and drank it, et cetera, you don't know it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing too, is you were a little bit later season. It wasn't super late season. It was, but later season. But you do the August opener for sheep, and then you have a totally different issue. You're dying of heat exhaustion, right? So, although you can have bad weather in August as well in the mountains, as you know. So, interesting that you got some really crappy weather, and did it impact your hunt? You guys didn't get on caribou, and that was the weather. I think sounded like maybe it was a bit of a factor there as well. Eh?
Oh, absolutely. We landed on the 13th and it was beautiful. And we woke up on the 14th and there was 2 inches of snow outside the tent and we went, uh-oh. But we saw a caribou right away, 300 meters from the tent. It was like, oh, game on. And it wasn't legal. And then another one stood up. It might have been legal and they buggered off. And that pretty much set the tone for the trip because the weather was so unstable. The animals just weren't moving. We saw caribou up on one of the mountains, like way up there in the Alpine. And on the day we flew out, it was beautiful, but we were on the lake and those mountains that are about 7K straight across, you know where I'm referring to, up on the hills there, we spotted 3 caribou, but it was 2 cows and a calf and they were way up there. So they were the animals weren't moving, but we saw maybe 15 caribou and a few moose, and we put 2 nice big bulls down. So those
Awesome, man.
those Yukon bulls, holy crap! They, like me and Prince George, we've taken a bunch of moose here, and you get 400 pounders on the hook and 450 pounders on the hook. And I dropped one of the bulls at the butcher yesterday, Sunday afternoon, Sunday morning. Yeah, all the days are blending into one. But it was 454 pounds of deboned meat from one moose, 11 game bags. It's straight line from camp. It was 1.5K, but we shot it at 8:30 in the morning, and we weren't done till about 8 o'clock at night. Now it's between 4 guys. It was nuts, the size of these animals up there. But yeah, every step we took, we're like, okay, life sucks. We hate this. Why are we doing this? But we each took our share, and now it's like, okay, well, we just booked today for 2023. So
nice. Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, congrats on a great hunt, and glad you got 2 moose, and successful mission, and another great appreciation for the mountains, and sounds like a great.
We did get up there into the mountains, but like I said, when we crested that hill, it was okay. The weather's not too bad, but as soon as we got into that bowl, Greg and I were like, oh, this sucks. The wind just kicked the crap out of us. It was blowing sleet and hail, and you couldn't see, and literally nothing was moving again up there. Just they were all bedded on the leeward side, and there was no safe way to get to it. We wanted to go over the crest and then down and check out the other side where they'd be hiding, but there was no way we could have done it safely. So we'll see what the weather. Hopefully the weather is a little different in 2023, and we'll go from there.
Cool, man. Well, welcome back. Glad to have you back. We did miss you. While you were away, we're dealing with this, these underage sheep, or these short sheep, we're calling them, this issue that we're having in British Columbia this year. And while you're away, we had a chance to sit down with, it was myself and Adam Janke from Beyond the Kill podcast sat down. Dylan Ayers reached out and asked us to do a podcast. Actually, Dylan was looking for people that might want to talk on the issue. You sent it over to me and said, hey, Dylan's talking about this. You might want to reach out to him, which I did while you're away. So on this podcast, we sit down, episode 44, and talk about the short sheep issue in BC, maybe some of the causing factors, why it's a concern, and had a really good talk. Obviously, Dylan's a sheep hunter, and we talk lots about short sheep. And then, of course, getting Adam's perspective on things is always fantastic to hear his perspective as well. So a really, really good episode. This is recorded on the Eat Wild podcast with Dylan hosting. Adam and I are guests. Dylan has generously said we could share the content. And we figured for our listeners, maybe that aren't familiar with the Eat Wild podcast, that you might want to listen to this one and check it out. Have a good listen, but then head over to Dylan's podcast, Eat Wild, and give him a listen as well. He actually got a great ram this year. He talks about his sheep hunt on his own platform there as well. So check him out. But anyway, episode 44, and Dylan Ayers from Eat Wild and Adam Janke, Beyond the Kill, talking about short sheep. And just before we let you go, a quick reminder that we do have just over a week to go for our doghouse tent trailer. It's a great raffle that's donated to us by Doghouse, and we got a few tickets left on that. This is a $10,000 package. It's awesome. It'd be fantastic. It'd be great for you're not going to take it in the mountains with you, but you take it out to the edge of the mountains. It's great for deer camp, any of that stuff, and just a really, really cool setup. All the money goes back to Wild Sheep Conservation BC. So just grab a couple tickets, head over to wildsheepsociety.com. You can get your tickets there, and let's, we're going to draw that October 16th in Victoria here. So on that note, episode 44, short sheep with Dylan Ayers, myself, and Adam Janke. Enjoy.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Wild Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Ayers, and in this podcast we want to share mentorship to learn how to hunt, fish, and gather wild food. Our goal is to reduce barriers and create an inclusive and welcoming community for all folks who want to learn how to eat wild. So join us as we share stories, ethics, adventures, and knowledge about a way of life that's rooted in eating wild. Hey folks, welcome back to the Eat Wild podcast. All right, so I was kind of all set to launch my sheep hunting, call it the Ram-tastic Adventure sheep hunting podcast series. And if you follow me on social media, you'll know that we had an awesome sheep hunting adventure. And I was just about to drop that, but on my way back from elk hunting, I saw this post on social media, and it was of 7 illegal rams that had come in to the Conservation Officer Service already this year. And as it turns out, there's about 12 illegal rams that have been shot this year. So that's concerning for so many reasons, and that's what this podcast is about. So before I get into celebrating sheep hunting and storytelling about how awesome sheep hunting is and how much fun it can be, I think it's important to recognize how challenging it can be and the conservation impacts of the illegal sheep harvest, and I also think the larger impacts in terms of the sustainability of the hunt, whether both socially and from a conservation perspective, but certainly with that level of error, it's concerning, and I think it brings up a lot of questions. Is that why is there such a high percentage of illegal animals being killed in a relatively small hunt with relatively small participation? And I think the next question that comes up is what are the motivations, what are the drivers from the hunting community as to making the decisions to end up harvesting illegal animals? So while on my way down from the north, I posted the image and kind of got it out there within the community, our Eat Wild social media community, and asking the question, like, who should we be talking about this issue with? And a couple of names that came up right away were Adam Janke, who is the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Mountain Hunting. He's also the co-host of the podcast, which is a very successful podcast in the hunting space. And the other person that was mentioned that I should reach out to and talk to about this issue to have this conversation was Kyle Stelter, and Kyle is the president of the Wild Sheep British Columbia. He's also a director on the Wild Sheep. I think that goes across North America. But both of these guys, I reached out to them within minutes. They got back to me and said, "Yeah, we want to have this conversation. This is a concern to see this many sheep coming in, illegal sheep, and it's a conversation that we need to have within the hunting community." So I was very pleased to have them on here. So, anyways, next couple days later, here we are Sunday night. They're coming on to join us for this conversation, and I think it's an important one that we need to have as a hunting community. I think it touches on a number of themes, talks a little bit about the increase in overall hunting numbers in BC. It also talks about the different motivations that sort of new hunters may have as far as achievement and challenge as it relates to hunting, and some interesting things to dive into here. So the conversation, I think, is really valuable, and I hope you enjoy it. Now, before we get started, we do have a sponsor. I want to recognize West Coast Kitchen. They do backpack food for us, backpack hunters and sheep hunters, and they create a whole food product, and they dehydrate it, put it in a bag so you can enjoy it on your backcountry adventures. And their food's amazing. It sustains me on my long adventures where I really need my body to perform. And overall, it's a super good product. And if you want to go to their website, you can put Eat Wild into their discount code and you'll get a discount. I think it's 10%. Anyways, awesome product. Happy to promote them on the podcast. All right, let's get into it. Hey, Kyle, Adam, welcome to the Eat Wild podcast. Kyle, how you doing?
Pretty awesome, man. Appreciate you having me on. It's good to see your smiling faces over there, and stoked to be here tonight.
Yeah, totally. Adam, how you getting excited about elk hunting?
I sure am, man. It's a few days away, and hopefully I don't come home with an uncut tag like I did for my sheep hunt this year. So, I'm excited, but really happy to be here to have this conversation and talk about obviously a pretty serious issue for the BC sheep community.
Totally. Well, I'm quite stoked to have, I said it before, like we started recording a couple of heavy hitters on the Eat Wild podcast to talk about this issue. And I was on my way back from my elk hunt, and it's a long drive. And that image of those sheep, I think there's 7 or 8 rams on the back of a CO truck, all of which were confiscated for various reasons because they were illegal sheep. And that image is quite stunning. And the caption in it, I think it was Kyle, probably BC Wild Sheep put it out, about, that there had been a number of sheep. Well, maybe Kyle, just quickly give me the synopsis of the story you guys had posted initially of the illegal rams.
Yeah, you bet, Dylan. The provincial wild sheep mount goat specialist reached out to us. Bill Jackson just said they've seen a severe uptick in the number of short sheep shot this year, that it's unprecedented what they're seeing come across their desk. And originally, I think that photo showed 7 rams that were, quote, illegal. They didn't meet the full curl or mature criteria, and that was for Region 7/7B alone. So I'm hearing about 12 rams at this point that they know of that have been harvested that weren't legal. So, obviously a very serious thing that these are illegal animals that are being shot. It's like shooting a 3-point and a 4-point season, and obviously has long-term effects on our wild sheep population. So something that we're very concerned about.
Yeah, absolutely. So having seen that, I just threw a post up to sort of tell that story a little bit and share it. And I asked the folks out there, who should I be talking to about this issue and what's driving why are a number of sheep coming in that are illegal? And both your names came up from the social media world that have on here. So I was great. Within an hour, both of you guys had committed to coming on the podcast in a couple of days. So thank you for that. And I appreciate having this conversation. And so what I'd like to get to is really just to dive a little bit into, how do we get to a place where, on an average year, there is 3 to 5 illegal sheep harvested in British Columbia. And in this year, I've heard similar numbers, Kyle. About 12 sheep have come in, illegal sheep, and that's it's over double that we would typically see, and then obviously that's concerning. And I think a few of the numbers that are important here is that we're talking about an average annual harvest of about 200 sheep in British Columbia, and this year, and most of those being Thinhorn. If you're talking about 12 animals, that's a huge percentage of the population that are being incorrectly harvested. Maybe I'll ask you, Adam. Adam, did you see any legal rams on your sheep hunt?
I'm going to give it 98% yes, but it was from a distance far enough away that we needed to get closer. And as much as I hate to admit it, we couldn't get closer in the time we had left. So I've got a couple of rams burn a hole in my brain since then that and I guess maybe what I would say is I'm probably 99% confident that they were legal on curl, but from 3K away, you can never be sure. And we had to get closer, but that wasn't going to be sufficient for us, my hunting partner and I, as far as, sort of the standard we'd set, but we did see some. Yeah.
Cool. And I think we'll probably come back to that. Like there's I came back from my first successful sheep hunt, and there was there's sort of a gap that you close where you see the sheep at 3 kilometers away, and you're 90% sure. And as you get closer to the animal, you see more characteristics of the legal ram, and maybe you go to 95% certainty, 98% certainty, and then 100 yards away, you're counting rings and you're 99% sure, but trying to get to that 100% certainty requires a lot of experience and confidence, and that process is really challenging. Maybe Kyle, I know you've been a sheep hunter a long time, and maybe you could just share what that process is like, kind of the hunt. Just walk us through a bit what a sheep hunt's about, from kind of the mountain hunting aspect to the looking at a legal ram.
Oh, that's you just killed 2 hours there, Dylan, for us. So,
can you 3 sentences?
I'll try and keep it a bit pithy, but Yeah, no, of course that's the whole thing is being on the mountain and being in their backyard. At least for me and a lot of people I talk to and the wild sheep community, and that's a great thing that I feel that the wild sheep community's grown into this experience from the Wild Sheep Foundation in BC. Here we got the Wild Sheep Society BC, and of course Adam, what he's been doing with the journal. This backcountry experience, this mountain experience, being on the mountain, what it's like to be in their backyard, and I think we've done a pretty good job of articulating that, certainly through the journal, and then the foundation does a fantastic job day in and day out. So people are wanting to be out there. They want to experience that. They want to go in and be in the backyard with the wild sheep and see where they live and how they. And honestly, for me, I've been very fortunate. I think I've been on 5 different trips where we've harvested sheep, and it's cool. But honestly, some of my best experiences, we came home with our tags uncut. It's just being in their backyard. This year, like Adam, I was out there. I think I spent 14 days in the backcountry and never pulled the trigger. And I was 99.9% sure on one ram, but it was one of those things where we just never, ever, ever got full assurance. And we could never have a scenario what we're looking at here with this issue that we're talking about tonight. So I guess that kind of leads to where you're headed and trying to get close enough and understand if these sheep are legal. And it's a really, really tough thing. And I'm certainly never going to sit there and tell people how to judge sheep because I can't do it. I'm certainly going to mentor someone that I might take it out in the field with me. And my sheep hunting partner, he's been doing it for, I think, about 35 years now. So yeah, I couldn't have a better, more experienced guy with me. And even then, we never, ever independently are going to ever harvest a sheep without having had some dialogue and each looked at them and given our 5-star approval. We just don't do that. And this year was another example. We had a ram and we never got quite to that 100 yards, which we needed to, and we just couldn't make a decision on him. There was absolutely no doubt in my mind he was legal, but there was that 0.1% where we just didn't know. We let him walk. We just watched him walk off the mountain. He was still at 500 yards, which, I wouldn't have shot him anyway at that range, but we never got close enough to get that final decision. A bit of a windy day, and we couldn't count the rings, and he was downhill on us, so we had some challenges knowing if he was full curl past the nose. He sure looked like it, but again, there's so many challenges with this aging scenario. So there's the aging aspect, and then there's a full curl aspect. And I guess for your listeners to keep it pretty tight with, there's thinhorn and bighorns, and with thinhorns, there's really 2 criteria. Full curl is full curl. If they're past the nose when viewed from the side, effectively they get the gold seal approval. And then there's also a maturity issue. And if they're 8 years of age and you can verify that also makes them legal as well. Again, consult the regulations. Don't take my word on this. Read your regs and understand them. But really, that's the 2 criteria that they need to meet before you can, one of those 2 before you can harvest one. So really, you need to make sure they're either 8 years old or greater or full curl. And that's really what's happening is these guys or gals, whoever they are, have gone out, harvest this sheep, and they haven't been past the nose or they haven't been 8 years of age. And that's the issue. They call it short sheep, not making past the nose, and they're underage as well. So that is the crux of the matter. Adam, feel free to follow up on that if I missed anything.
No, I mean, I think you nailed it. I mean, as far as, Dylan, I'm not sure what the level of experience will be to a certain proportion of the audience, right? But when it's described that way, it sounds, reasonably straightforward, right? It's like, whatever. You see the rings, you see past the nose. Well, if you look at enough sheep horns, you know that, I mean, yours is a great example, right? You're the gentleman's ram. There it had a lot of character, had a lot of coloration that made it, a challenge to age, and you guys did a damn great job of doing that, right? Some sheep it couldn't be easier, right? Mm-hmm. So it is, like Kyle said, you read the regs, you look at the pictures in the regs, and you're like, oh, come on, how hard can this be? And then you get out there, and it's a hell of a lot tougher than it, and maybe that's a great thing, right? We just need to exercise a little bit more. I don't know what the word would be, patience, caution, restraint maybe, because it isn't as easy as it looks to be on paper.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And as I was sitting on the 100 yards from the gentleman ram, I was feeling such a high level of anxiety as to whether or not I could distinguish if that ram was 100% legal, that at a couple of points I was like, I can walk away. I can just walk away, and I don't have to deal with this anxiety anymore to try and see this through. And that in itself is so, like, I think that's such an interesting conversation around like that uncertainty and anxiety that it builds. Like, why would you put yourself through that? And I think we'll talk about that later, about some of the motivations around like why we find ourselves sort of going through this. And I think that's an important conversation. But that's a great start. Let me just throw out a few stats out of interest, and I think this is kind of neat. So in British Columbia, in the last 10 years, we've seen about a 10% increase in hunter participation, people buying their hunting licenses in British Columbia. So we're up to about 107,000 BC hunting license holders, which is getting close to our, I think in like the 80s, there was something like 120,000 or 130,000 hunting licenses sold. I should be careful because I don't have that one on the top of my head, but I recall that being somewhere in the neighborhood. So general growth in hunting over the past, about 10% in the past 10 years. But sheep is kind of interesting. And I when I looked at this, so there was 2,200 sheep tags sold in 2011 or 2020, and then in 2020, 2021, there's 3,200. So I think if I math this right, that's almost about 1,000 more tags, which is essentially about a 50% increase on 2000. So wow, that's a significant increase when we're looking at a general increase in participation of 10%, but in the sheep hunting interest, there's a considerable growth in interest, which I think is remarkable. Now, the other interesting part about this is that the sheep harvest rate has actually dropped in the last 10 years. So that could be, maybe I'll ask two questions, sorry, based on those numbers. First is, Adam, I'll ask you, have you seen, and as the editor and involved with the Journal of Mountain Hunting project, have you seen an increased interest in sheep hunting within your following or readership? And do those stats make sense to you?
It's the first I'm hearing those stats, and it's certainly surprising that it's that significant an increase. I struggle to answer this, in the simple way that you're asking it, Dylan, because that was always kind of like the core focus of the publication, was the diehard or dedicated mountain hunter, whether that's sheep or goats or deep backcountry for elk or mule deer, whatever it might be, moose, etc. So I feel like my lens might be a little bit tainted on that, because it's always kind of been, and within that community, we all well know that sheep are at the top there. That's the pinnacle. So it's always been a topic of discussion. I would say generally in the landscape of the hunting media space, there's been a big shift, a big change, right? When we started the journal, and part of the inspiration for me doing it was I couldn't get enough, sort of hardcore mountain hunting content from any other source, right? It was like the Sitka blog or the Kuyu blog, or somebody would, post an awesome story on hunting BC, and I just devour it. Dave Marsh's stories, right? Like a guy like him and the effort he would put into that, it was amazing, right? Well, now just how much content is out there from, publications like ours or projects like mine. But there's just so many other outlets out there promoting this lifestyle, and that's a great thing. But I think it may have have people rushing to achieve something that they need to spend more time learning about, and whatever that may be. So I think, although I haven't seen a big change in our audience, I think the broader audience for mountain hunting has grown massively in the last few years.
Yeah, that's a kind of interesting way of I like that, how you broke that down, and I sort of acknowledging just how much, like across the board, how many people are doing this and going out and doing their own projects and telling this story. And 10 years ago, there wasn't a lot of people talking about this stuff. And I think it's important that there's I've always enjoyed the journal because you're providing information about how to do this stuff safely and talking about the gear but it seems that the explosion of storytelling around mountain hunting is just, it's like, well, tenfold now, 10 years later, which is not surprising. So.
Yeah. And if I could just add to that quickly, Dylan, I think, you use the term storytelling. Well, there's varying degrees of storytelling. And I think, we all know the phrase, do it for the gram. And I'm not going to sit here and say it's all about social media. I think that's like the easy card that everyone throws down. It's because of social media, and that it's a factor. But I think, there's, and you've hit into that, getting to this later, the motivation or the ethos within the community. I think that's changed a lot since, I started the journal 7 years ago, and certainly in the past 10, probably 20 years, I think there is a change in the ethos in a segment of the community, right? This need to do it to prove something versus for a true love of the animals and the places they put you.
Okay, that's okay. So that's kind of where I want to get to and dive into that a little bit. Before we get there, Kyle, why don't you just because you're sort of this is your world. That sheep harvest rate is sort of interesting when you're seeing participation increasing by 50%, and you're seeing either stable or maybe even dropping off sheep harvest rates. I think 10 years ago, 250 rams were killed. I think we're down to about 170 rams, or in around between 170 and 200 rams last couple of years. Any thoughts on what those drivers are for lower? I think the sheep harvest rate in BC is 80 hunter days for every harvested ram. And I think that's maybe 10 years ago, it was maybe 50 days of hunting effort for every harvested ram in BC.
Yeah, it's a good question. The thing is, we are seeing new people out in the backcountry, and people out on their own without maybe that mentorship or support, and trying to do it on their own. And it's no joke. They always say, I'm going to butcher the adage here, but they said the ram you killed is going to be born the year you start sheep hunting, meaning that it's going to take you 8 or 9 years before you're going to kill your first ram of sheep hunting. So, there's a lot of truth to that. If somebody goes out there and thinks they're going to be lucky and harvest a 40-inch ram or, 170-inch stone sheep in their first year, I think it's pretty naive. And, if you even get to see one, I think it's a privilege in your first year. And at some point, you're going to be lucky. And, Adam, I think you're still less than one. And how many years you've been hunting sheep for?
9 years.
Yeah, and you're a hell of a hunter. I know it's not for lack of effort, not lack of intel, not lack of information, not lack of commitment, not lack of input. And here we are 9 years later. And so to me, that tells a story, right? But I do think there are new challenges. I think that there is some increased pressure. Well, we've seen this increase of 50%, like you said, Dylan. So we know there's more people on the landscape. I think, with the advent of technology, we have access to more information on the internet. Just go to one of the popular websites and Google a number of lakes for hunting sheep in BC, and there's just going to be a list come up, and you call up a float operator and off you go. Back in the old days, back when I started, there wasn't a lot of information, and my first sheep show, I went up to Kamloops. It was Dave Marsh, and Dave was like, if you want a sheep hunt, you got to come here and you got to talk to us and talk to sheep hunters. That's where sheep hunters hang out. Come here and hang out. And that's where I got my first X on the map or whatever. I guess I didn't get that, but somebody said, go check this out. And, I was lucky, and we got into sheep, and it was fantastic. So I think that, things have changed a little bit with technology and information. And, you talked about, is it easier to harvest a sheep? I think that we have all the resources that should make it easier, but I believe now it's much harder. With increased pressure and maybe also expectations. And I think you just got to be more resourceful now. If you think you're going to fly into your local lake and hike for half an hour off the lake or half a day and get a sheep, you're probably going to have to hike 2 or 3 days if you're going to be successful or have success. So, yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it, Dylan.
Yeah, then you got to have the weather. And then you got to have sheep show up and all these other factors that make it extremely difficult. So that was my question. You kind of answered my first question, which is sheep hunting easier than ever? And Adam, what are your thoughts around? I mean, this is kind of, there's advancements in gear and technology as it relates to mountain hunting.
Mhm.
I mean, it's kind of an obvious question, but maybe you can just share with us how much easier it is to be in the mountains compared to 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, I mean it's I didn't grow up a mountain hunter. I'm from pardon me, Eastern Ontario, so I can't speak to 20 years ago. I can certainly speak to 10 plus years ago. Just the changes I've seen, and then especially with through the journal, and having the good fortune to meet a lot of people in the gear and et cetera space. It is just wild. I mean, you got rifles that are stripped down to nothing, right? A few pounds. Like we're not, when I say a few, I don't mean like 7 to 10. I mean, like you can find rifles
Three.
like 3, 4, 5 scoped. It's crazy. So, and this is something that, I'm not gonna say I struggle with, but I've said this on our podcast probably 100 times. Like I waited longer than I wanted to go north. Like when you ask me how long have I been sheep hunting, it should be longer, but I waited because I couldn't find someone to go with or to take me. And I was, just hesitant. Right. And at some point you just got to go and be willing to learn. Right. But that's a really, really key part of this whole process, that willingness to learn and to accept, quote unquote, a failed trip, but a massive learning opportunity trip as like extreme success. And so, on the gear side of things, it is so much easier to feel confident and comfortable going, like not waiting, right? And so if you hear somebody say like, oh, just get out there and just get out there and you're gonna figure it out. You got to get your reps in, you got to pay your dues, whatever it might be. So many of the barriers that, might have existed 10 years ago just don't, right? I mean, the apparel's great, the packs are great, the boots are great, the optics are, crazy, rangefinders are getting smart, scopes are getting smart. Like there's just so many things that can make you more comfortable, maybe not capable, but certainly comfortable. But like the gear can't replace skills. And I think that's, a huge, huge part of this problem, right? Is that we are, constantly spoon-fed gear, and shoot, I'm part of that, right? Through our publication, we talk about gear a lot, like you said, Dylan, but there's just no replacement for skills, right? Like, how many times have we all heard the story, guy in, denim, cowboy boots and a plaid shirt and riding a horse and still gets it done, So the gear is, such a part of this community, but it's not what makes this community.
Yeah,
that's if I could put it that way.
I was brainstorming this topic with Mickey, my partner. We went for a chanterelle mushroom pick today, the first of the season, and took a drive to our secret spot, and we were kind of bouncing ideas off each other. But so Kyle, what you just sort of share with us, like information is more available than ever as it relates to mountain hunting. And Adam, you're like, well, and gear is more, is going to keep us safer. But information and gear do not equal, experience and skill, which is something that takes time to develop. And I was thinking back, I did a podcast a while back with last year with Mark Hall of the Hunter Conservationist podcast, and we talked about the hunter graduation scale. And it was kind of about like, as a new hunter, what should be your first endeavor as hunting, and how do you build up that confidence, experience, and skill to eventually get to a place where you have, so you start with grouse, and that kind of gets you to a mule deer spike buck, and that gets you to maybe a whitetail buck, and eventually you take on a bigger animal like a moose or an elk. And then probably somewhere right at the end of this hunter graduation scale is, going up and hunting a goat or hunting a sheep. And because of what I think is the amount of like skill and experience and knowledge that it would take to be safe in the mountains, as well as be confident as a hunter, as you're approaching these much more technical, challenging hunts. Like I know that in my own hunter graduation process that I've hunted since I was a kid, like 12 years old, and sheep hunting is something that I only started really focusing on in the last 10 years. That's partly because of I think financial barriers or something, just having the time and money to go and invest in a 2-week, fly-in type trip, or just even to walk in. And then, just also, like as you get more comfortable and experienced in the mountains, that it opens itself up to you as an opportunity. So would you say, Adam, that you're seeing people kind of, maybe jumping from grouse to sheep hunting in your view of things? Well,
it's funny as you're talking about that, I made a note to myself. I think we've probably all heard it a lot. And Dylan, I would assume that you have a lot of interaction with people that fall under the label adult onset hunter. And that's an amazing thing. Like some of the most passionate, crazy obsessed hunters I know in the mountain hunting space are adult onset hunters, because they find this kind of like, a little bit later in life than those of us that grew up with it. And it is like a drug that they do not want out of their arm. And it's awesome. Like I love seeing that. I love seeing people have the opportunity to have these experiences. But if you think about, a lot of the people, especially in, pardon me, our audience, and this is maybe in a sort of a boomerang fashion, coming back to the question you asked me a while back, Dylan. We see people that come from a high level of competency in some other mountain activity, backcountry skiing, climbing, even just like professionally, forestry, stuff like that, who have, the fundamental skills to be very comfortable in, the kind of environments that some people that grow up with grouse, then mule deer, and a lot of people top out at, elk and moose. And that's great. Like that's awesome. But they don't go, they don't see the point of, or the interest in, say, goats or sheep, or it's maybe a one-day thing. Well, a lot of these people that come into it late, they're coming into it because of goats and sheep, right? Like that's the draw. And it's not so much that I'm sure there's people that they're skipping steps. But I mean, if your entry point is, I'm a badass mountain something or other, you got all the skills in the world to be in the mountains, and now all you have to do is learn how to shoot well or stalk if it's with a bow, and then, age and gender identify, then, a lot of people can feel that runway is pretty short. Yeah. So I think there's an interesting phenomenon happening with that. That is, I'm sure, maybe not part of what we're specifically discussing, here today with these short sheep, but it's definitely a part of the community now.
Yeah. So what I'm where I see that is that you've already got a culture of people who enjoy the challenge of the mountains and are seeking to bag that peak or ski that unskied run or shoot or something like that. And they're sidestepping over and adding sheep hunting to it. And it's like, wow, I could do all those mountains and add this incredibly there's a huge challenge to it, and try to achieve this incredible accomplishment. And Kyle, from your perspective in wild sheep and having a huge membership and lots of people in the community, are you seeing a shift in some of the motivations of people coming to wild sheep or becoming sheep hunters?
That's a good question. I don't know that I've seen a significant shift, although, like Adam said, we had a gentleman this year that signed up as a member, and that's exactly, he was in the hiking community and very experienced guy in the backcountry, and he figured out hunting. And I'm not sure exactly what the catalyst was. I wouldn't be surprised that it was through the journal. It was something like that. And so he decided, okay, I'm going to go get my gun license, my core. Went through all the steps. In his first year, he went out and shot a really nice ram. And that's his first big game animal harvested. So, that you don't normally see in my space. Typically when I joined the society, over a decade ago, there was a lot of people that were very experienced hunters and kind of slowly got into the sheep game, and that was kind of the transition. I never really seen anyone that was their first hunt ever was a sheep hunt. So I think that there has been a bit of a transition, and I really think it does go back to the great job that our community's done, the hunting community's done, and particularly the journals led that right from the get-go. For 7 years now, Adam's been creating this experience and talking what it's like to be in this backcountry But I think, in piggybacking that, the foundation for years has done that as well. And they've just done such a great job of articulating how great it is to be back there, and the mountain experience and the majesty of the wild sheep themselves. So I think there's a big part of that is definitely creating this interest for this community. And a lot of people are looking to this now, and they want to be part of that. And there's so much on it now. It just, if you go on Instagram or Facebook, it's endless, the amount of backcountry experiences is, and I can see why it's alluring for people, for sure.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe that kind of moves us to sort of this, where maybe the pressure or the mounting pressure to have success comes from. And I work in park management in my real life, or my real job. This is my side hustle. But of course, I manage the busiest provincial parks in BC, being the Lower Mainland provincial parks, and of course we have increases in tremendous increases in searches and deaths in our parks. And most of those, when you start to relate what's happening, it's because people are going out and trying to have experiences that are beyond their capabilities. And a lot of what we're surmising from this is that people, they see images of their peers going out and getting to a waterfall or to a peak or to a viewing area, and it looks accessible because they saw their peer do it. And then I think compounding that is also sort of that sentiment of wanting to achieve that same experience. So there's the first piece is that it looks more accessible, and the second piece is there's sort of this drive to have success. And I think very much so this is what might be happening within our hunting community, whether it's 4-point bucks, and I think that if you look towards the sheep end of things, it's really the pinnacle of this sort of like, hey, I got my sheep and I'm just as guilty as anybody else. It's the first thing I did after a successful sheep hunt is I got the images up and shared the story. And, and that's something that, it's a big part of my hunting story, but, I think that's something that's part of, and granted, like when I shot my first sheep, I felt some level of relief from the pressure that there was around. Adam, do you feel that pressure?
Oh, like dude, yeah. I mean, I have, for a long time. But you said something there I think is really, and maybe it wasn't like, maybe I'm taking it differently than what you intended, but when you said, when I shot my sheep, like that's a really, really, really important statement for us, I think, to promote more. And if I could, Dylan, I want to share a story from my most recent hunt up north. We got our asses absolutely handed to us in our first location. It was a hike-in hunt. And had come back out to the truck, and we're, looking at our wounds and realizing we weren't nearly as tough as we thought we were, right? And these two guys come walking up to a vehicle that was parked in the same area. And it was a father-son. And Kyle, I've been meaning to ask you, because I'm going to bet you'll know the guy. I won't share his name on here, but he's wearing a WSSBC hat. He was in his early 50s, like sinew, muscle, and bone. That's it. Been hunting sheep for 30 odd years. They're wearing like these frame packs that are like 7 feet tall. It mix of gear, right? But it was, and the son was in his early 20s. They went in 7 days before the opener and only had given themselves like 4-5 after. But they wanted to be in there for that long. One, to find the ram that they were after. Not that they knew what they were after, but like a certain class. But they were also just very happy to just be in sheep for 7 days with zero ability to pull the trigger. This guy had videos of sheep walking around their camp, like just milling about, like he's at a petting zoo. It was nuts. And we get chatting with him, pardon me. And, he goes on to say like, oh yeah, I know, he shows us a picture. He's like, this is the guy, this is the one we were after, but we couldn't get to him. And he was there for his son. And like the sort of punchline to the story is, it's like, oh yeah, I've got my ram. Spent the last 3 years trying to get one for his son. Right? He's been hunting for 30 years, and then maybe he's got a few, I don't know. But there's just this level of respect for the sheep that, you know, at the point in the trip, like coming back to pressure, I'm feeling like shit, pardon the French, for, you know, having our butts handed to us. I'm starting to feel this like, not again, right? Feeling. And then this guy walks out of the bush and he's just thrashed from this hike. But he just has this, you know, moment of pure honesty of like, I've got my ram and we found some legal, shootable sheep for his son, but not at the standards he had set for his family. Legal's legal. I'm not passing judgment or saying anything there, but man, was that something for me. Like to just, it was just incredible. And I had a good buddy of mine. This was his first sheep hunt. And it was just such an incredible moment for him as well. Like his first sheep hunt, and to run into somebody like this from, again, coming back to that ethos of not any ram, a ram, or even the ram. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, it's, I'm not passing judgment on anyone who's killed a whole pile of sheep. That's incredible. That is an incredible achievement. But I think we need to talk about those sort of guys more than, you know, the whack and stack, personally.
Yeah. And I mean, that's, you know, I constantly battle my own ego when it comes to hunting. And it's something that, you know, I see it crop up at times. And if, when I get there's an interesting story we did some podcasting around our sheep hunt this year. And there's a sort of a moment where like, I kind of reflect on how like beat up I am by my ego driving my, you know, my feeling around the hunt that we're on, because our buddies who are actually on their first, there's 4 of us in an area, and Jenny and I split up when we went up one ridge and our buddies went up the other ridge. Now this is literally their first ever sheep hunt they've been on, and they climb up 40 minutes up this ridge and they put their spotting scope up, and they see a ram on the ridge side, on the skyline, and it's a no doubter legal ram. Like it's got a 4-inch curl above its nose, like no doubt. And so when we come back down to base camp and we talk about what we're doing for opening day, like they're kind of like, well, you know, Dylan, you're kind of like the old guy here. You know, you got to put together the hunt. Maybe you should go shoot this ram. And of course, I can't do that because they spotted the ram, but my ego was like, oh man, like this is like year 10 of dedicated trips and probably year 15 to looking at rams, and I was just getting beat up by my ego. And I was saying, hey, sorry guys, I'm tuning out here. Like my ego is like kind of eating me up here a bit. What really I should be just so thrilled that we are in sheep country and you guys found a sheep, and this is wonderful. Like this is wonderful. And spending more time in that space of like checking the ego, and this is wonderful, this experience. And I love that story, Adam, because that dude is like in that wonderful headspace. Like he's, and you know, and meanwhile you're kicking rocks, and it's just like, no, like we're so privileged to be here, you know?
Well, and like, I share that story not to say like we should all conduct ourselves in that manner. I share that as like, there are different versions of success in sheep hunting and all hunting. But it was just, you know, and I've met many a person like this since I kind of got involved with the sheep community. I mean, the gentleman who was responsible for me going on my very first true northern trip, he was telling me stories left, right, and center. And every time he would come back from a sheep hunt, he would say, nope, didn't kill one, because he knew what he was looking for. Right. And so, you know, I think, and then there's those who, you know, they get a good legal ram, you know, under their belt, and then they're looking for a certain thing. They want tipped out, they want broom, they want, like, there's ways to go about it that, you know, is to each their own. So I don't want anyone listening to think that I'm saying like you should only ever take one ram. That is not what I'm saying. It's just, I think when we expose ourselves to, I hate to throw out the social media thing again, but people who probably don't have a social media account, you go to like the Kamloops convention, for instance, Kyle, and talk to some of the people that roam the floor there, or, you know, Reno for the Wild Sheep Foundation sheep show. You meet some people who, you know, couldn't even spell Facebook or Instagram, but they've got a hell of a lot of experience under their belt.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So Kyle, maybe you've been around sheep hunting a long time in the community, and no doubt you've heard these stories of you know, hunters making mistakes. Can you reflect on why hunters are making mistakes from your perspective as someone who's been immersed in this world for a long time? What are some of the common mistakes, and what do they look like?
Yeah, at the end of the day, when you're coming off the mountain and you're getting your sheep CI'd, and that's some of the things that people have been asking me, like why are they shooting these illegal sheep? Like why would they do that? And the short answer is, first of all, they don't know they're illegal. Nobody would shoot a ram thinking it was illegal, and because you have to take it in, you have to get it CI'd, and all these sheep are compulsory inspection, so they have to be inspected by a government biologist or a designate, a contractor, if you will. So they have to go through this inspection process, and then they get plugged. And the Wild Sheep Foundation provides what's called plugs to every single sheep hunting environment or area in North America. In the world, actually, they provide these plugs, and what they do is they drill a hole in the horn, and the plug goes in, and basically it stops the illegal trade of sheep going across borders. Or if you don't have a plug, that sheep is illegal. It's been poached at some point. So it needs to have a plug to be, quote, certified by these government biologists. So every sheep that you have has to go through a compulsory inspection. So nobody's ever going to pull a trigger on an illegal ram unless they're just outright poaching. I guess it probably does happen, but I'm not familiar of any cases of that. So with regards to, how does this happen? At the end of the day, I think there maybe is a lack of education or a lack of certainty about pulling the trigger. And that's one of the things that we really advocate through the society is aging sheep and making sure that that they're legal. And, it's interesting. This year is a bad year for us, knowing that we have 12 underage rams that were harvested. But we've probably done more outreach this year about sheep and about aging and about how important it is. Adam, he through the journal, you guys did a great job. Clay did a seminar earlier. Clay Lancaster, a renowned guide in the guide outfitting community, did a great video on it. You guys shared it. We shared it through our convention, through our social media channels. We've had horn aging through the regional biologists on our network. Now, the one component that's been missed the last 2 years, and I'm not going to attribute this year to that, is we normally have horn aging at our sheep show, and we in Kamloops. We didn't do that this year because of COVID, we were canceled. So obviously this is not directly tied to it. We get maybe 50 people or 100 people to our seminars, less than 100 for sure. So that's really not the issue. So why is this happening? I think, there is a huge motivation for people to go out there and kill a sheep. For me, like I said, I've been very blessed. I've been able to hunt with a very experienced guy that has spent years doing this. And he did teach me about patience and about not being quick to pull a trigger. And there's many a ram over the years that we've let walk off the mountainside because we just weren't sure. We counted 8 and we were sure there were 8. We both thought there were 8. We kind of have this rule, and this is our personal hunting rule, but unless we can confirm 9, we wouldn't even think about pulling the trigger. So if we count a ram and we see 8 rings, unless he's well past his nose, of course, then it's a no-brainer. But that in itself too is challenging, Dylan. And I know we got to be respectful of your time tonight. But a lot of people will judge rams and they'll say, "Yeah, he was full curl," but there's a whole bunch of factors that go into that. And as we know, it's not simple. Depending on your perspective, if you're above the ram or below the ram, all of it changes. And there's been many a ram that we've passed that we look at him and he's standing up there on the hill and he's above us and he looks well past his nose, but being at a 20 degree or 15 degree angle at that ram, we just can't verify that he actually is above his nose because it has to be looked at from a level perspective. So yeah, a lot of factors go in, and it's one of the hardest things to do for sure. It's not simply looking and counting 4 points. If you're counting those rings and you're not sure, you shouldn't even be thinking about going after them. So, I think one of the things, I guess what your question is, what's the change? It's always been hard. There's no question. It's always been hard to judge a ram. That hasn't changed. I think what's happened is, maybe the pressure's higher, And I think that mentorship piece is a big part of it. Having someone in the field and having someone there to support you. And if you got a great mentor, it really, really helps a lot. I know there's a lot of people that go out on their first hunt and they're by themselves and they're still successful. I'm not saying you can't do it, but I think having that mentorship piece is a really big part of it.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think it kind of comes back to either the hunter graduation scale, which sort of implicitly has that mentorship support. The part that kind of interests me, if you like, nothing's 100% in hunting. Well, if you're hunting 6-point bull elk, you're sure there's 6 points there, but you count them, again, and then you pull the trigger. As you get more experience, maybe instead of counting 10 times, you count 3 times, and you get more and more comfortable, right? And I think that's this year more than ever. I felt more comfortable aging rams, and partly actually there was some great education tools from Wild Sheep for sure. I think I did look at the Clay Lancaster talking about aging rams using the crown method. That was a really great tool to add to my knowledge base around aging sheep. But ultimately, it's just you just got to see a lot of sheep, and it's 10 years worth of sheep for me has made me more comfortable. And the more time you sit with sheep and look at sheep, you get more comfortable. So I couldn't imagine getting to the place where I'm feeling that 90, 95 to 98 to 99.99.9 to 100%. I think that'd be really hard to get there in my early years of sheep hunting. And I can get to 98, I can get to 97, 98, but I think at the end of the day, there's a gap there that you kind of, and I think what must be happening is people are thinking that they're looking at a legal ram. They're not 100%, because if they were 100%, then it would be a legal ram, and it's not a legal ram. So something's driving them to make up that gap of 2 or 3 or 10% of certainty by pulling the trigger and hoping for the best. And I think that's a reality. And I know I've heard hunters relay that in different concepts, whether it's elk hunting particularly, because I think people see 3 points on the top and they're like, it's got to be legal, bang. And then thank God it's got 3 more points, which it typically does, but sometimes they don't always. And I've heard of stories of where people can walk up to what should be a 6-point bull elk and it's missing an eye guard, and it's not. And I feel like there's a little bit of pressure to close that gap. And that's the part that I'm interested in. Is that something that's increased amongst the hunting community? And is that something that we can talk about more to have people acknowledge that, yeah, there's going to be risk here but closing that risk to zero, as close to zero as possible. Do you reflect on that, Adam? Is that something that you've experienced yourself in your hunting experience?
Yeah, no, it's funny you talk about the counting points on a bull elk. That first bull elk I shot, we'll never forget the counting process. And then even after I'd counted, like you said, 10 times, decided to pull the trigger. I couldn't believe it. To me, it was my first time going up north and blah, blah, blah. And I won't make a story out of it. Point being, even after I had told myself I was sure, there was doubt, right? I just couldn't believe that it had happened. Right. And so there's no question that's a big part of it. And, I think on the sheep side of things, I would love to know more about the actual circumstances around, these 12 rams. What was the shot distance? What was the shot angle? What sort of tools did they have? Right. And I'll throw myself under the bus on this. I didn't own a phone scope or comparable type device until this year, because Clay, in that podcast he did that we shared, which was originally through my friend Jay Nickel, who has a podcast called Mindful Hunter. He literally said, you're an idiot if you don't, take a phone scope and use it to take pictures and take video and study it, zoom in, use every tool available to you. And I didn't do that sort of stuff because I have this weird, annoying sort of, whatever old school streak to me. Right. But earlier at the outset, when I said I'm 99% of seeing those legal rams, legal on curl at least, at 3 kilometers away. I'm sure there's somebody listening, maybe even you, Kyle. It's Adam, come on, 99% at 3K. But if I shared you the number of pictures and videos I took of those rams over many, 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 many hours, you probably feel a little bit more comfortable acknowledging 99%. But I couldn't have done that without those tools. And even, ponying up on glass, like you hear it, you're like, I don't really need it, but it matters. It really does. And I'm not trying to sling gear there, but the tools, it's more about skill, I believe, but there are tools we can use to help close that gap and get those percentages closer and closer to where they need to be, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I think I love that podcast was great. Actually, I really enjoyed it. I listened to it as well on my way down in preparation for this call with you guys, is just to see what was out there, and that also came up in the dialogue on the social media that we were doing around this. So if we don't figure this out, right? Like, there's obviously implications, right? If this goes, like, I see lots of implications around. If you have, what amounts to 5 or 10% of your population as illegal harvest out of 200, it's unacceptable, right? And that's not something that we need to address it as a community. And obviously there's consequences. And I think that those are pretty obvious. Some of the consequences, if we're perceived to be, well, for one, if we have a hunt that doesn't appear to be sustainable in the measures that we use to manage it, I think there's also the implications of like a perception of it. If there's a sort of drive for it to be, if there's ego driving these hunts and in pursuit of challenge and accomplishment, and that those are things that I think become the target of folks outside of the hunting community looking at what we do as hunters as and latching to that and saying that's a really negative attribute of what we do, and that can really cause, I think that's, obviously, Kyle, you guys have done a great job recently of sort of advocating for, continued opportunities for hunters and be awareness around folks trying to target the hunting community. How vulnerable do you feel when these types of stories come up as someone who spends their, great deal of their time advocating for continued opportunities to hunt?
Yeah, honestly, it's pretty demoralizing, to be honest. It's one of those things that, we have direct control over. It's pretty simple, right? It's just, you just don't pull the trigger. It's just that simple. And I get it. It's tough. It's tough to judge sheep, and it's not an easy thing to do. But at the end of the day, it's something we can control directly, and it does have a conservation effect down the road. And it's certainly a train wreck when it comes to the greater community. Like you said, we're trying to, support this the conservation movement to make sure there's wildlife in the landscape, and when this stuff happens, when we have this high harvest of young rams, it does have a conservation effect. It's not something that is not going to go unchecked, and certainly if we do this every year, it's not sustainable. There's going to be closures. There's going to be we don't know where it's going to go, right? So there's so many people in our community that worked really hard day in and day out, volunteeringly, endless amounts of time, money, and effort to make sure there's wildlife out there. And then, decisions like these it's pretty simple. Like if you will care about the resource, if you care about seeing wild sheep, you never want to do something like that. And it's something that it's one of the things I take almost more seriously than my safety when I'm in the backcountry. I would rather fall off the cliff than take a sheep illegally. I just can't imagine anything worse, to be honest. And it's pretty sad when it's pretty straightforward. It's just, if you're not 100% sure, then you shouldn't even be considering it. And it's pretty sad that we were to this point. So yeah, it affects me pretty deeply, and it's something we have to take pretty seriously because it's going to have an effect for sure.
Well, Adam, when I said, hey, do you want to come on the podcast and talk about this? You got back to me in 30 seconds. Says, I'll make time for this. So where's your head at when you saw that note come out, or the post come out?
Yeah, first off, honestly, it was like, obviously sucks, but it was, my first response was kind of questions, right? What's the context here? Like, this is too much. There's no question. This is too much. This is, a large increase from what is typical. But you put it really well, right, Dylan? Like, nobody willingly walks a ram into getting in for the CI process thinking that they're going to get it taken away, right? So there's a lot at stake. I should answer that part of it. There's a lot at stake here, right? Are we going to lose opportunity? Are we going to lose more of the I don't like to use the term, but I will because I think it applies here, the social license side of, our ability to hunt sheep. We know, I mean, Kyle, may be worth talking about the Act Now campaign and why that's something that, WSSBC has been so vocal about. But this opportunity, this privilege, like, let's call it what it is. This privilege is on the line, and we're fighting. We're already fighting to keep it and keep the opportunities that we have. And these sort of things most obviously do not help it and are in certain ways like inexcusable. But there's a side to this that I would really love to understand better. And where my head's at now is, and I have no idea if this is even remotely in the realm of possibility, but it almost feels like we need to do like a case study of this to understand how it happened. Like, actually speak with the people and say, what were the decisions you made? What were the tools you had available to you? What were the decisions you made? What did your preparation look like? Because we can't fix this if we don't understand where the gap was, right? And I think we've got to figure out a way to do that, because in my head, my initial reaction was, well, there is, mistakes happen, but when in doubt, don't pull the trigger. And there's so many resources available these days. It's just not that. I mean, it's hard, like we said, but the more you learn about this, I think the more hesitant you would be to pull the trigger, right? So there's an education or a knowledge gap there, but potentially that can be closed. But I think we just need to understand the circumstances as well as we can, because if it keeps happening, like you said, Dylan, we're going to lose a lot here.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Totally. So I mean, I think that as I think we're kind of coming to some conclusions here, or really what I was hoping where to land is like, what can we do? And I think we've all touched on education is a big piece. And I mean, I think that there's some great tools out there, and more than ever, there's great tools out there. It's just encouraging everybody to find them and digest them and spend time with those resources. But I think the other thing is just talking about it. And I think that starting this conversation that we're having, and hopefully others, that it helps people understand how hard it is to age rams and the process that it takes and the need for mentorship that Kyle, you've talked about having the benefit of having a mentor sent next to you. And I can't tell you how many times I've looked at sheep going, I just wish I had somebody next to me that's looked at rams for 35 years. Like, man, I've ever feel like that so many times, like trying to figure it out. And so, I mean, those are all things. I mean, like the other thing that I think we'll kind of end on this is like, there is this social media push for accomplishment, right? To meet this challenge and have this, like, to have this accomplishment in your hunt, as a hunter. And I think one thing that we need to continue to talk about, and I think, Adam, that story of the guy coming out of the woods just with a big smile on his face, like, we got to continue to tell that story and create language and stories around the experience and the privilege of being able to go sheep hunting, and what that brings without a sheep. This does not need to be an accomplishment to kill something. The accomplishment is surviving for 10 or 12 days in the mountains in British Columbia. And if you could do that, you're a sheep hunter,
That's right.
Like, you don't need to kill anything. Like,
yeah,
I know lots of sheep hunters that never killed a sheep, and now they're retired because they can't do it anymore. But they were so happy that they were able to hunt sheep for 10 years. And the only advice they ever gave me is they say, start young, because you're going to love it, and you're only going to be able to do it until you're, I think, maybe 45, because I don't feel like I'm feeling pretty beat up right now.
Well, it's that Ortega quote, right? I'm going to get it wrong here. I don't hunt to have killed, I kill to have hunted, I believe is some
Nice.
version of it, right? And it's so true. I mean, like, on this most recent sheep hunt of mine, as I said earlier, I had a real good buddy of mine, first real full dedicated sheep hunt. And the day we found those rams, like, I wish I'd just set my iPhone up and hit record, because it was just constant commentary, like, holy, like, just, he's losing his mind, right? Like, he just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And it's for sure illegal, it's for sure, like, he's just like, the level of excitement was incredible. And I was excited, like, don't get me wrong, I was very excited. but just to like that part of the experience. I mean, he turned to me when we decided to move to where we needed to move to make our play, which ended up not panning out, as I said earlier. But he turned to me and he's like, man, like I feel like we've achieved everything we needed to here. He's like, I'm in for the long haul. Like, let's get this done. But if this was the last day, he's like, this has been the best hunt of my life. And, that's, I think pretty meaningful, right? And like, don't get me wrong. Like, yes, we all want to cut a tag every once in a while, but, there's a lot more to this, and there's a lot more at stake than just notching tags and posting pics and whatever else may be involved with it.
Oh, let's just take the pressure off ourselves a little bit and just man, we buy over-the-counter tags and go sheep hunting, man. Nowhere else in North America can you do that. Maybe, Kyle, I'll leave it to you for some sort of final thoughts on this conversation, and we'll wrap things up and then maybe have an offline chat after.
Yeah, for sure. The one thing I do think would be helpful for our community, and I see this in other jurisdictions, I see this in Oregon, Arizona does it as well, is if you're going sheep hunting, you get a sheep tag, they basically offer the sheep course where you come in and do some aging. And, I'd actually like to see our government put something in place where, and they do this in Alaska as well for archery. If you want to get an archery tag, you come in and you have to take a training, or you have to challenge a course, and you have to shoot with a level of proficiency that they're comfortable with, and you actually have to pass an exam. I think that's maybe taking it a bit too far with us in BC here, but having some sort of, and we see this problem, and it's growing, and it continues to be a pervasive problem, is some level of education, and just say before if it's your first time sheep hunting, you go out and you do this course, and maybe it's an online course, and maybe it's 30 minutes, but gives you that level of comfort so that you can see the challenges, you can see and kind of see the impact. Because I think a lot of people in our community that go out sheep hunting the first time, they're like, okay, I shot a short sheep, big deal. They don't realize that there's consequences to that on a conservation level, and certainly when we have 12 rams halfway through the season, that has a significant impact that's going to affect those sheep populations. So I think I'd like to see that education piece. We do offer a little bit of that. I think we're getting better at it. Like I said, Adam did a great job of sharing that information piece to the journalists here. I think we need more of that. I'd like to see it throughout the community, to be honest with you, that it doesn't have to be something that's overarching, but just something quick, and so people can get a little bit of education, then also realize the consequences of what's happening when they don't shoot a mature animal. So it's my thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I was feeling really fortunate because we had our rams CI'd while we were passing through Fort St. John, and the Region 7 biologist Mike Bridger came down to the CI workshop. And there was actually another biologist there. So we had the CI, who is an avid sheep hunter, sheep guide, and taxidermist, plus 2 biologists. And we were in a taxidermist workshop. So there was like rams like 360 degrees around us on the walls. So we just spent like 2 hours talking sheep and sheep aging. And like I walked out of there, I was like, wow, that was like, man, I wish I had my camera running. That would have been the ultimate like eat wild, like, learn to hunt, webinar if I was just running that, because it was just so much information there. And then like my level of comfort with sheep aging just went through the roof. But I do like what you're saying, Kyle. Like, I think it's not just the education piece. It's about understanding the consequence, both for conservation, the impact that, these are mature rams. These are breeding rams. These 6-7-year-olds, they're the key breeders in the group. And then also recognizing that, like Adam, as you said, like this is a privilege. And if we don't get this right, then we're going to lose our privilege to do this and hunt these animals, and it just doesn't reflect well in our community. So, shit, Kyle, Adam, this has been fun, man. Nice to hang out with you guys.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks, Dylan.
Cool.
Really
okay, well,
it, man.
Yeah, no, this is a good conversation. Thanks for doing this. And okay, folks, well, we'll wrap it up here, and hopefully I'll catch you next time on the Eat Wild Podcast. Hey folks, I hope you enjoyed that podcast. Now, we'd love to hear from you. So drop us a question either on our Instagram or email me directly at dylan@eatwild.ca, and we'll do our best to answer that question on our future podcast, or we might even build an entire podcast based on your questions. So thanks for doing that. So if you want to hear more from Eat Wild, you can come join us. We're doing a series of Eat Wild Learn to Hunt webinars. So we're getting together on a monthly basis, talking about all things hunting with a group of mentors through a webinar format. They're tons of fun. Come join us there. Now, if you happen to live in the Vancouver, British Columbia area, we do in-person workshops where we get together, learn fundamental skills for you to be a better hunter. Hope you can hang out for one of those too if you happen to be in the area. Now, we'd love it if you could leave a review or a comment wherever you listen to your podcast. That'd be a great help to us. And more importantly, share this podcast with folks who care about the stuff we're talking about. So thanks for doing that. Until next time, eat well and wild.